is we want to reach agreement, without sort of saying we've got to have a strategies and alternatives convention. I'm saying we've got to figure out how to incorporate the whole range, the wide range of alternatives that are going to be coming our way. We need to incorporate that into our decision-making process. We need to, if we're going to have a subcommittee, we need to agree on the subcommittee. Probably, if this is going to happen, there needs to be some kind of invitation issued to the world, really, to show up with their alternatives. We need to agree on that. To get some useful stuff and some comparable stuff, we're going to need to make sure that the criteria that are going to be used in the evaluation of all of these alternatives, the criteria are explicit. Probably pretty coarse criteria at this stage, but there need to be some, and it needs to be explicit so that people know what they're aiming at. Those ones we really do want to reach agreement on, if we can, possibly. And then we can talk about scenarios, perhaps, that we'd like to give them, or even agreement on course problem statements. These you might actually end up wanting to give to the stratas to work out for you. But in any case, there's a lot to do on this topic. Mike.
Am I correct in understanding that this takes place without having any need to know what the exact gap is or how significant or whatever? This is like, I've got an idea about either a conservation idea that's not being used right now or that could be expanded, or I've got an idea of where to get some water. And whatever that is, this is their chance to present that. They don't have to answer and they should be able to say how much could be saved or produced by their solution. And it should be communicated in some way to lay people. We don't want to have somebody get up there and put a math formula on the board. And that's what I'm assuming. And you go to this fair or this event or this, however we're going to structure it, you get this information by having these people. This is their chance to say. The people that are saying right now, I know what the solution is and you're all idiots because you don't understand it. This is their chance to put it forward, hopefully in a nice and polite way, but to put forward their solution and why we should be excited by it. Is that what we're after here?
That's right, and you're right that there needs to be some kind of parameters described by you that represent the limits or the criteria that you're going to apply when you evaluate the proposals.
I mean, what I'm saying is I don't think they need to have to know we've got a certain amount that they might have a solution that produces a little bit of water that they think's all we need, or they might have a solution that's something else. And they might have some, what we think of as cockamamie ideas. Let's do cloud seeding or something. There's no clouds. I mean, whatever. But they should be able to present that. If they think it's a feasible solution that we ought to take seriously, it should be considered.
I think it's important to recognize that there will be some proposals that will only take, it's like this little piece of the problem gets solved by this little proposal. Yeah. And there may be some really comprehensive ones. I mean, who knows? We can't tell. Eric.
So we don't have to do our work before we figure out. So I don't want the criteria to be you must produce X amount of water or you must save X amount of Y amount of water. It should be open-ended for that on that level.
We need to decide right now, if we can, what kinds of criteria you want to set out to guide the proposals that are prepared. You're right. I mean, definitely. I don't know what they should be. Go ahead, Eric.
I'm kind of thinking of the Alt Fair also as a chance for community engagement. And as such, I was thinking to really broaden it out and possibly have categories of entries. So like we've got our more serious categories of people who really have studied it and have a serious solution they want to present. But then I was thinking that maybe we could also have a category for kids even, and get some kids involved in just sharing the ways that they save water themselves, in their houses, and also what they might just, kids come up with their ideas. Just to have it also be not just a serious thing, but also have a place for, just a more lighthearted engagement piece.
Thank you, Erica. Other comments about this? You all got the paper that was sent out, so you had a chance to look at that, I hope. David's got his hand up. Rick is waiting. Sarah is emptying her mouth. Go ahead, David.
I'm looking at the paper that was sent out, and it identifies the next steps. And one of them, I mean, there's really one of them that is going to be the one that seems to me to require our discussion significantly, which is to agree on the 3 criteria.
Yeah.
And I would like to have some staff guidance on what they might be recommending in that regard, if there is anything. The rest is stuff that will go to the committee, and they'll come back with us with something fleshed out a little further. And you know, there's going to be the issues of filtering, balance, and what presentations will be, you know, face-to-face with someone doing, you know, talking to us, and what might be just, you know, available with in writing or other ways it might be presented. Someone's going to have to do some filtering and prioritizing in there.
Because if you want to have this happen and not interfere with your recon schedule, you would really have to give this subcommittee permission to get the ball rolling before the July meeting.
Right.
Oh, because when you said the subcommittee would come back, what did you mean?
You know, the way this is structured, the subcommittee's going to be given some criteria by us, and then it's going to get the ball rolling, and it's going to do the filtering and prioritizing and determining the presentations.
So, can you look at the item on page 3 that says September committee meeting?
Yes.
There are a list of criteria in that paragraph. 3 criteria might be effectiveness, environmental impact, and practicability, broadly enough. And the idea would be sort of, it's really, the idea as presented here is a 2-phase thing. One is between now and the July meeting, we put out, if you wanted to do it, some invitation would be put out, fairly simple information request to come back, brief description, tell us what your idea is, describe it, whatever, what does it take to make it happen, something like that. We see how many we get, and then if you like what you get and you want to go forward with it, then you may ask for some additional information. And the idea would be at the September meeting, there would be, you would have all had a chance to go at the event, which would have happened just before the meeting, to look at all the things that would actually be physically presented at an event. And you would all have your little clipboards and go around and you would be rating them, not the committee. That's what's presented.
So yeah, so what's presented here is obviously just an idea which we know sort of fits in the schedule that's evolving for your work. The schedule is really a big driver in the design of this. So Rick, you had your hand up, and
I have a little concern that, you know, we want to attract people who are offering ideas that are feasible, and rather than unfeasible, and so I would like to try to urge, you know, people who have ideas to attend our meetings where we're looking at alternatives that have been looked at in the past. You know, what are the current alternatives that the professionals are considering right now? You know, so that people have a basic grounding in those kind of things. Like, because they can come to one of those meetings and say, you know, we ought to put a dam in the Zayante Creek, you know, which I think is not feasible, but they, by coming to one of those meetings, they could get the experts to say, you know, this is why it's not feasible. And then that way we could winnow out some stuff in advance. And it would make for a better event if we're not attracting a lot of kind of wacky ideas. One of the,
as I said, it's the schedule to a large extent that's sort of driving the design of this, of the paper that we put forward. The way that you propose it, the way that you were describing it, the way I understood you were describing it, suggests that there'll be meetings that you will have where you will essentially consider these proposals. And what we're hoping is to be able to put the activity of your consideration of this actually outside of these meetings, because you don't have that many meetings. You don't have that much time, and to put that, to impose this process, that really a lot of what you're describing, sort of descriptions, general education, that kind of thing, and then the people would put together their proposals of alternatives. that would all be on your time, or a lot of that would be on your time.
Yeah, I understand that. My point was just to, I think we'll have a better event if we kind of weeded out some of the unfeasible ideas. And the only way I can think to do that is to really kind of invite the people who have these ideas to get involved in our process, to hear from the experts, to actually even raise, we have John Ricker come, people in the public can have public comment, right?
So how long would it be before you think everybody would be ready sufficiently to present alternatives?
We're looking at an event in September, correct?
Well, there would be the actual sort of final event would be in September. Yeah.
So we invite whoever this goes up on our website. You got an alternative to recommend. Okay, here's what's happening in July. We strongly urge that you come to this to get grounded in what has been considered in the past and what's being considered now.
So the July event would become an event, essentially an educational event. The July meeting.
It's just our regular meeting. We're just inviting people to come to the meeting.
Okay.
So your underlying interest is to make sure that the wisdom that you're developing as a committee feeds into these alternatives so that you get better products.
Right, thank you.
So let me walk through this beautiful Gantt chart, because there might be a way to meet your interest in what's there already, and if not, we'll change it. So the idea is there's two phases here, because one of the questions you don't know the answer to is how many submissions you'll even get. I mean, if you're going to get 8, you don't want to have a convention. And if you get 30, there's different issues that you have to deal with. So the idea was that people would submit a very short submission between this meeting and the July meeting, very short. And you're right, Mike, it's probably not that necessary to tell them how many gallons they need to shoot for that. And then when you meet in July and when your subcommittee, whatever it's going to be, has had a chance to kind of cook these ideas, you'll at least know what the population is that you're looking at. So at that July meeting, people who've already submitted could have received a response from you all saying, thank you very much, and by the way, we're having this meeting in July, and your phase 2 of your submission might really benefit from what you would learn there. And here's a link to a PowerPoint, or whatever. So the second submittal, so those bars that have the blue line on the border and then little speckles on the inside, those are where the public is doing something. So they have a short period of time between now and July to just say, here's the title of my alternative and a brief description, and then they have a longer period of time after they've had the education you're talking about to submit again, or beef up their submission, and then would be the convention if in fact you want to have it. So by having the two-phase approach, it would be an opportunity for the education you're talking about to happen.
David and then Mark.
One of the things I'm not clear on in this proposal is if there is a point in time when, as to each of the submissions, we're going to get a consultant/staff report that tells us how the consultant and staff are evaluating this. Is this something that's been previously considered? Are there things about this that we should know that aren't part of the presentation or part of the materials that's been presented, so that we can effectively rate them with the criteria based on a broader knowledge base?
So you feel that you're going to need something from consultants or from staff that sort of digests what's coming in through this process.
Someone's going to make a proposal to us, and we're going to have what's on the face of their proposal and what's in our minds and our individual research. I want our consultant and our staff to look at these proposals and to, tell us this one is one that's already part of our master conservation plan. This one is something we considered and rejected. This is something that is well recognized and in use here, and we might consider it. I mean, whatever.
Thanks. Okay, I get it. Mark.
This is an idea that was shared. As you all know, I meet with a subcommittee of the chamber every month to discuss what's going on here and kind of reach out to the chamber. And this was an idea that was really well accepted, that this is an opportunity. I think Erica brought up this, a real outreach opportunity. And it also gives our entire community, if you want to get involved, this is a great way to get involved. And we want to hear from you. And I think it's a crucial outreach step in our process. And I don't think we should put too many restrictions on it. I think we should invite, like I think Rosemary said, any and all. If you have an idea, bring it. You know, we want to hear from you. And then I also agree with David's assessment. And I think, you know, in the back of all of our minds, we have to do an evaluation of the merits of the idea. Is this an idea that's worth further pursuit, or is this an idea that we should just drop? And that process, I think, we have to go through no matter what. That's our job. So I think it'll unfold wonderfully, and I'm looking forward to hearing some great ideas.
Thank you, Mark. So it seems, I mean, the first thing I wanted to do was to see if there was agreement about the idea of the SAC, as it's called. And it seems like there is generally an agreement that it's important to have a process. I'm not sure that you're all agreed on exactly the process that was proposed in the paper. But maybe we can go there and see. What I'd like to do is to sort of drill into this and reach agreement on whatever version of this you think is appropriate. So if you start from what's in the paper, could we start there and say what it doesn't do for us or what it would do for us? And
Start with what it doesn't do for us. Start with what we need that we don't have in there.
Okay. Start with what we need and we don't have in there. This is David's suggestion. So what do you need that's not in there? Or Mike?
I liked Erica's idea earlier about doing stuff with kids, but I don't think it's through this process. I think it would be part of the outreach committee coming up with an event that kids could be at and their parents and stuff, and kids and their parents could be at this event and stuff, and it's sort of a general broad public education campaign rather than we're likely to get out of that a solution that can be implemented on a broad scale. It would be useful as part of the public education about conservation issues and all kinds of other stuff that kids would come up with. So I'd follow that path, not through this, but through the outreach. One of the strategies of the outreach committee to reach the general public about what's going on here. A coloring book thing. I'm not creative about that, but something that would be kids would find fun and bring their families into it. Sorry. They bring their families into it in some way and stuff. I think it wouldn't be necessarily part of this formal alternatives search.
Thank you, Mike. Other things that, yes, Charlie.
A couple of things came to light when I was reading this. Although this is a very tech-savvy community, it's all web-based, the submissions and correspondence, and I wonder if there's going to be some facility for accommodating people who aren't comfortable with the internet or the web, that would probably not participate if they were forced to do this through a computer.
Okay, so we need to have a non-web-based access in the first, because it's only the sort of the first round that's really all about using the web. So that would need to have a non-web.
Just to make it all inclusive.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Charlie. Other issues, Mark?
I just noticed in sort of the very beginning, we talk about goals and desired outcomes. There's discussion around supply, but there's no discussion around reducing demand. And so it might be something that could be added, that we want to hear about ideas to reduce demand.
Thank you, Mark. I want to channel Doug, who's not here, but who sent some questions in. He thought that to do with this, we should publish our criteria up front as part of the public notice, so that presented alternatives are by definition responsive, and we have a framework for responding to folks. So I don't think there's anything very original in that. It's sort of kind of what you were discussing before. Rick?
I just wanted to affirm, I think Erica brought this up, that there'd be a kind of different types of format for presenting ideas. I've been to events where people just get up like popcorn, there's like, they've got a 1 minute time in which to present their idea, and that might be good for, whatever, just a little conservation idea that might spark some other interest. So that way we kind of mix it up between, the longer serious presentations and just the brilliant little ideas.
You raise an interesting issue, because the way that I was imagining it as it's described, it would be like you take a big hall and you have essentially presentations, information stands, booths, a poster session. So the people who want to evaluate or understand what's being proposed simply walk from one booth to the next around the room. So you can do it at your own pace. You don't have to be sitting and just waiting for people to pop up. As you say, some people just take 30 seconds, other people may take a couple of hours.
Yeah, a variation on that theme is where the whole group is together for 5 minutes, and then the people who are presenting kind of pop up and say, well, my booth over there, this is what it's about, and so that they get a little chance to introduce in the whole group.
A kind of marketing idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Dana, go ahead.
I was just agreeing with Rick's comment that it may make sense to give them an opportunity when everyone's paying attention to have 5 or 10 minutes just to say their piece, and then we can ask follow-up questions later. That way the person who's presenting doesn't have to say their story over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And that may just come down to logistics on how many people, right? I mean, so I guess I want to step back again. Do we want to have this be a curated alternatives fair, or do we want it literally open to all of the public? And that's like we take the submissions and then we say, yes, you can come, no, you can't come. Or do we want it open to everyone, and then we've got the list of submissions and we design our questions to ask them when we're interacting with them? They both have merits and are different approaches.
So the proposal, I think, does it both ways, essentially. I mean, maybe not exactly as you're describing it, but essentially there's a very broad sort of come on, all of you, at the beginning, and then it's sort of filtered out for the second one.
Right, but that's my question. Do we want to do the filtering out, or do we want everyone in the room?
For both phases. Okay. Mike.
No doubt, however you do it, somebody will appear at the 11th hour saying, I missed my chance, and it's April, and I want to tell you my ideas. But despite that, I think you want to avoid a situation where anybody can say, I've got the best idea, and they didn't even listen to me. It's outrageous. I open it to everybody. Let people bring every idea. Let it be seen. If it doesn't get through and nobody picks it up and runs with it, then you had your shot and you didn't persuade any of 14 people to bring it up at the table. But if you in a quiet room somewhere say no to 6 people, those people spend the rest of their lives angry and telling everybody else how this group was closed and didn't consider the best ideas. It's inevitable.
Thank you, Mike. David.
I don't think this is a discussion we need to have right now if we're actually going to follow Rosemary's proposal, because it sounds like that is a discussion that we would hear back from the subcommittee about at our July meeting, and that would be driven a lot by how many submissions we get, and I mean, if we get a very large volume, it may not be feasible for us to hear from each one. If we aren't getting a huge volume, that different things are more possible. So.
Well, so we've got some really only small changes that you've asked for the. Go ahead, Sarah.
But that matters in how we present it to people, because in our first run we have to tell them if they're going to be okay. We're going to review these, and then you may not be invited to the actual event. So that has to be information that's provided up front, and that's why I was asking the question.
Well, you could tell people what the process is, and that a decision will be made on that at our July meeting.
And let's hear from Sarah, from Rosemary, who wrote it.
So I think actually Doug hit the nail on the head. I think that the invitation would ask people to provide information on these 3 criteria that are in here, a little bit sort of, this is how these are going to be judged ultimately, but it's not going to be that's how this was written. Doesn't mean this has to be. It wasn't an in or out. It was, you put in a submission, you're going to be in the event. If it's a 3-phase process, submission, first round submission, second round submission, event, you come to all 3 of those, your submission, whatever you want to put in front of this group of people, it's going to be there. But the expectation would be that people would provide information of the type that would help you all evaluate those for at least those 3 criteria.
Thank you. So I just want to point out, we've got about 10 more minutes to go on this before we need to move on to some other stuff and still get you out of here at 6 o'clock. How do we feel about the broad, in really only in broad terms, I think, the proposal that was in front of you, that's in front of you? David?
I'm comfortable with the proposal, provided we get the consultant staff input that I mentioned earlier. I'm comfortable with the proposal, provided we get the consultant staff input that I talked about earlier.
Okay. Does anybody have any objections to the proposal with the proviso that David included?
Well, go ahead, Mark.
I want to make sure that there is an alternative to the website. I'm
Oh, yes,
appreciating the earlier
That
comment.
was Charlie's comment,
yeah.
yes. So we got those two additions to it. Otherwise, it's okay. Good. Thank you very much. Then,
So we have an area of agreement. Oh, I'm sorry to mix it up with something else. Okay.
so then the next thing is, or I think the next thing is, do you need a subcommittee?
Yes.
I think it sounds like you do. The subcommittee would be the SAC subcommittee.
The SAC, the WSAC?
The SAD SACs. It would be, presumably it will only exist for as long as this process exists, so it'll only go until like September or October.
And your first job is to come up with a better acronym.
So that's the first job. And then what other charges are there that we should be putting in here for this subcommittee? There are some tasks that are coming up right away, and others will remind me. There needs to be an invitation sent. There needs to be criteria developed, unless we're able to get to that now. What else? Somebody tell me.
I think that those three criteria ought to be discussed by the committee.
Yeah, it's better to have it here, it's true. There are actually a number of things that you could go to that I wrote down here, but I don't know these are not so important. Essentially, there are things that you could be asking the subcommittee and the consultant to work on about the really scenario descriptions and that kind of thing. But I don't think those are so important right now. Good. So we've got the charges. Basically, do what the concept paper says. What's that? And staff input on ratings.
Plus the non-web part of the chart.
Oh, the non-web thing. That's right. So develop the non-web issue that Charlie mentioned.
And when it comes to rating the submissions, staff has input in some system that you will design together.
Well, consultant and staff.
Consultant and staff.
Any other additions to the charge? Peter.
We had to comment before. We also want to include suggestions for conservation, not just for increasing supply.
That's right. So that needs to be in the. That's right. So.
Just absolutely, I'll add it. But was that not clear from the proposal?
It was sort of in one of the bullets and it wasn't in the other. Mark was right. It wasn't in there. It was an
Great.
oversight.
Thank you. So that cleaned that up. So we've got the charge.
But wait a second. There's something that Rick has gotten me to appreciate. It's conservation. It's making water, and it's what I call finding change in the cushions, which is the timing of the management. So it could be conservation or supply or something else, right? As long as it solves the problem, right?
Yeah.
Anything goes.
Okay. Then the duration we've already discussed. Who would like to be on this subcommittee?
I would, but I'm going to be leaving on September 8th, so.
That would be a pity, but I mean, you could work until September 8th if you wanted to. I think, to be honest,
October 21st.
there's probably the heavy lift is going to be at the beginning of this.
I mean, that's what I assumed, but, so I won't be able to do the logistics of an actual fair,
Yeah. So you
But
want to
I
have the
would
fun
be
part,
willing.
but you'll do all the work.
all the work.
How does that sound?
I know, right? It's a great plan.
So Sarah's on. Who else? Who else would like to be on this subcommittee? It's quite an important subcommittee.
So Doug.
Looking
and
around.
Sue,
Is it
Greg.
Doug, Sue, and Sarah.
And David.
Would you like to be on?
Oh, no, not on it. I'm just looking at Rosemary budget-wise, whether this would be a facilitated thing.
Oh, yeah.
Put you on the spot.
You know, I don't know. Can we figure that out? I mean, facilitated, do we have a lot? I don't know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt.
So we'll deal with the facilitation question later. But we only have one subcommittee member at this stage.
Do we really?
Oh, were you waving?
Just me.
No.
Thank you, Sid.
Thanks, Sid.
Were you scratching or
It'll be
waving?
fun.
I won't leave Sarah hanging.
Thank you, Sid. Okay,
I appreciate that.
good work. That's great. So,
But, you know, we have Dave, Greg,
Oh,
Doug,
they're not
and
here.
Sue. So
Yeah.
I think
They should all be on it.
so we should ask them. Yeah, yeah. Well, here's what I suggest. I suggest that
Fun.
let me suggest that Sarah and Sid get in touch with Doug and Sue when they get back, and recruit them if you can.
Sounds like a plan.
Does that sound okay?
Dave and Greg.
And Dave and Greg, yes. Good. So we've got the SAC agreed to. We've got the subcommittee. The invitation has to go out soon. Is there anything that the committee wants to say to the subcommittee about what this invitation should say?
How about it, people?
So there was a question raised about whether you actually need criteria for that first submission. This is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And if you did want to have criteria, according to, I checked in with Philip, the creator of that software I talked with yesterday, that if you wanted to do that, he said keep it as much simpler than the criteria that you'll use later on. Keep it to 3, if you possibly can bring yourselves to, at least for that first phase. And then if you want to expand it after you have your discussion in July and see what's in front of you, do. So that was his advice for what it's worth.
So there were 3 suggested in here. Would somebody dig them up?
Effectiveness, environmental impact, practicability.
So how does that sound? Maybe you could say it again, Charlie.
Effectiveness, environmental impact, and practicability.
How does that sound to people?
Those sound really good. I think it would be helpful to provide a definition of what do we mean by practicability.
There was a little bit more written around that, I think. Wasn't there, Sid?
Yeah, there
Oh,
was.
Charlie?
3 broad criteria, enough to cover a lot of the key concerns. For example, social and economic issues tuck into effectiveness, while cost and reliability tuck into practicability.
Yeah.
That was the
But we
extent
could
of it.
flesh those out now more if you wish, if we can do it quickly.
Yeah, I think after the first stage might be really good, because then you can see if, maybe we could ask people just to write a brief, a couple of sentences about how their alternative for phase 1 would respond to these things.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with leaving it broad because I don't want to cut people out or make people think it's too big. But when you say something like environmental impact, that has a pretty broad definition, and there are, at least in my mind, an extraordinarily large number of factors that can be wound around that topic. So it might be helpful to clarify what we mean by environmental impact.
So for each of these in the sort of instruction sheets, we could write a brief, this might include A, B, C, D, and E, or, and you don't have to give quantitative numbers, you might give qualitative answers at this stage, but to describe or similar kind of information that might be appropriate. So we can flesh this out a little bit to give people so it's not just a big old word that says, well, that can mean anything. What does it really mean? If we could do that.
It sounds like, we're going to, Charlie, it sounds like these are things that, in a sense, you're going to be instructing the subcommittee and the staff to handle. Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Charlie, go ahead.
I think the invitation should be as general as possible. If we're truly interested in getting all suggestions, the majority of people are not going to be qualified to make these assessments about practicability or environmental impact or or any of these values that we're going to spend months evaluating with the help of consultants. So to put too many restrictions on it up front, if we're genuinely interested in having people submit without fear that their idea isn't good enough or it's not going to pass muster, I wouldn't restrict it.
Thank you, Charlie. I think one of the reasons for being specific is that it enables you, as you're assessing these proposals, to assess them in a way that the proposers will expect. So that although you may be being kind of restrictive, as you said, in the first instance, you're essentially making sure that the people who present are presenting in ways that you can easily assess, and they will understand what the assessment is about. So, I mean, restrictive is one way of describing it. It's almost a sort of providing a sense of fairness in a way of, providing a sense of what the rules are, in a sense. But anyway, thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, so Charlie, kind of in response to that, I was thinking of framing it, that these are the criteria we will be assessing in the future, but we are taking any and all ideas to begin with, right? So it seems more of an open, but it provides that for people who are a little bit more serious and want, more specifics to be able to frame it in those questions. Does that, that was kind of what an approach, especially for the first call, would be. Does that sound reasonable? If we frame it more like,
Absolutely.
any and all come with your ideas, but these are the criteria we're going to be honing in on and evaluating.
Thank you.
Does that work?
It's good. Sarah is starting to draft this. David, go ahead, David.
At least at the first pass, as long as we're clear with people that their submission does not necessarily have to address each of the 3 criteria when they submit it initially, so they know how it'll be judged, but that it's not up to them necessarily to do the environmental work.
So I'd like to wrap this up now. We're not as far behind as we were when we started, but we're still about 5 minutes behind. And so we got the agreement on actually using, with some changes, the paper that was presented. We got agreement on the subcommittee. We got agreement on kind of the invitation and the criteria was sort of mixed up. We're saying the invitation needs to be broad and the criteria need to be clear, and the criteria are what the criteria were as discussed, the 3 criteria.
The committee will help define the criteria.
Certainly. But this is what we got for the July invitation. Thank you very much. Let's move on.
Just
Erica,
a clarification. So we're going to get some draft of the invitation pretty soon, it seems, and then the outreach committee will then go ahead and start outreaching on it. Basically, as soon as we get the draft, are we all right? Just making sure we are there.
So here's the thing. I mean, look, the Gantt chart is gone now, but the invitation for this first go-round needs to be out there before you meet again. So the invitation is not going to come back to you unless you'd at least. And what we could do is send it to you for a comment. Is that what you'd like to do?
I was planning on sending it to you each individually for comments. You can just reply back to it.
It's one of those do not reply to all things.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay.
That's how I did the bios. She sent it individually. I send it individually, so I don't ever have a quorum of.
Yeah. And they will not talk to each other, and they will only talk to Sarah. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So we're rolling on to July and August, the agendas for July and August. And we're 6 minutes behind. I'm sorry.
So you have paper copies of the July and August agendas.
Microphone.
And one of the things I hope you had time to look at on the wall is that beautiful Gantt chart that Doug and Sid and Clark helped with so much. Ideally, they would be stacked all in a column, and you can look down and you can see the various decisions that you have to make at every committee meeting. and the critical path issues. So far, we're good. You have done what you needed to do. And once I had the Gantt chart in place and I could see the decisions that needed to happen under this imagined schedule, I went backwards and shifted to, Clark, I'm just incompetent. Can you get this thing going? Did you guys see that I would burn my clock? I stuck it in front of the projector and it was started to steam little melted plastic. It was a $5 clock. Thanks. So what I did is I just went through and I figured out what had to happen in July and August. The other thing that Nicholas and I did together is we just put all the recurring pieces, whether it's public comment or, not that roll call takes a long time, but reviewing the summaries. Even with the extra time that you gave us last time, you functionally have 3 hours of grist out of the 8. It's kind of stunning. So you have the July and August agendas in front of you, and we have the screen working. Does anybody have any comments?
Yeah. I'm wondering how, like in this recon period, we're supposed to finish the recon with a kind of sense of what alternatives we'd like to look in more deeply, right?
Well, that's one of the things, yeah.
Right. So how do you see us?
I did it on purpose.
How do you see us being able to just inform ourselves of what those alternatives are? Because I don't find that on the agenda for July and August.
So really you're counting on this ALTS process that you just set forth to gather your alternatives. And that's the reason why you're not really looking at them until September. And you've reminded me of several things. So in the normal envisioning of the process, the alternatives discussion would be very close after the goals discussion. But because you're doing this ALTS thing, you're not going to actually have the alternatives discussion until that September meeting. That's why you don't see it in July and August. But as you all pointed out yesterday, if you're going to understand your decision process, you need to have some alternatives to play with. So I want to talk with you about getting permission to just pick some out of the air to play with in the interim. But first, I want to stick with your question.
I'm glad I asked this question because I guess I see it pretty differently about how we get informed about alternatives. I think the ALTS Fair is very important and it's a great public outreach tool, but the city spent hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 30 years on engineering studies to come up with alternatives. And millions? Okay. So, I think we need to start there anyway and learning what those are, and that takes time. I mean, Soquel Creek Water District has spent like 4 meetings or 5 meetings recently just looking into alternatives for themselves, you know. So I guess I want to suggest that in July and August meeting, you know, we start with a look at what has been, what has been said in these engineering studies, what the people who would know best professionally think are valuable in those studies to take another look at, and then what are the current things that are, you know, that are being worked on now.
Yes, Peter.
I want to agree with this. It should be parallel or even before we get the input from the public on alternatives, because we should get the millions of dollars of studies also in our portfolio and information package, basically.
Just information. I think there's about 8 things, or 6 or something. It's not millions. 6 or 8 major things that the city got to the point at some point of saying, let's study this. You know, raising the things, the size of the dam at Loch Lomond, a well drilling on the north for brackish water on the north coast? Is there a stream under the San Lorenzo River? I don't know all of them, but there's about 8. Maybe if I'm wrong, it's 10, but it's in that ballpark. And we can certainly get those studies, why those were rejected as not feasible for one reason, either for political or technical or some other economic reasons. That's information that's pretty readily accessible. Somebody could present that to the committee, because some of those will be resuggested. Some of those will be, these things that have been looked at will be resuggested by people that don't know we looked at them, or maybe they did know it, but I mean, so it might be useful at least to see drilling wells all over. We've drilled wells every place anybody ever thought there might be water in the city of Santa Cruz. They all came up dry. So someone should know that, so we don't waste our time thinking about drilling some more wells. It's done. That kind of stuff. So I guess I agree with Rick. Maybe if there is time in these meetings, that might be a very useful, it wouldn't take that long actually to do it. As long as people do their homework and read the studies first, come here and have a presentation, and maybe somebody will then argue, no, we need to look at this again, and here's a reason why. But out of that would come 1 or maybe 2 that are worth looking at again. Most of them, everybody will quickly see why they're not working.
So what I'd like to suggest is that actually this task would be a great one to give to Bob Rauscher and Stratus, and that the product would be a PowerPoint presentation that he would bring back to you and present, and that it would be an overview of what things have been looked at, and a description in some kind of common framework of things that might be floating around there that are on the table now. Everything from the recycled water and the water transfers and what have you, and that there's that it's a great way for them to get up to speed about the history of what's happened here, to understand what issues have been looked at. So if you're willing to give me the authority to give him that task as part of his backgrounding, then we can do that with the idea that the product is his assessment of all the information and synthesis of it and presentation of it to you, to give you the background that you're seeking in this conversation.
I think that's a great idea.
I would also suggest, if we are at that point already, to include some of our independent review panel at that stage, so that we have to get them up to speed too.
I don't know whether we will have the independent review panel on board by then, but certainly, the information that has been presented there is going to be available as a public document. They could review it later, raise any questions they might have. If we do, that would be swell, but reasonably, I think we have to put that out for at least a few weeks to get the kind of, input or potential participants that we might be looking for.
Okay, so there's a desire to start absorbing the alternatives, but here's the deal. If you think about a decision as requiring criteria, as well as alternatives, as well as the ratings, as well as figuring out and agreeing on the rating scales, et cetera, within the time allotted, the discussion that you have there is what your criteria are. I don't see that as less important than the alternatives. So what goes?
Now, I think you're talking about apples and oranges there. Rick is talking about us having a handle on what has been done and what has been considered and why they were rejected, if they were. And that is different than us considering the criteria by which we might evaluate things going forward.
Oh, it's quite different. But what I'm asking is, if you want to have significant agenda time about the previous work on alternatives, what's going to fall off?
Yeah, I think as we go along, the criteria will become clearer, and in the recon phase, it's not the most crucial, but we'll get to some criteria. So I find for myself, speaking for myself, that educating myself is the most important thing.
Okay.
And then I become much clearer on how to rate alternatives, and
So it would be okay to significantly reduce the discussion about the criteria to add in a report by Rauscher of a preliminary report, given the way things work, about the previous information on the alternatives and continue with the discussions in that way. There was a hand up.
I would also say, once we get a report, as Rosemary was describing it, of why those were rejected, we're all sitting here listening to it. We might discover, once we develop our criteria fully and get into the real deal, that one of those should be brought back now because the reason it was rejected is no longer, maybe one was rejected, say, for cost. And that turns out to be not the most significant reason. Back then, it was a good reason to get rid of it, but given all the fact that everything else seems to have been difficult, maybe somebody will say, no, let's reconsider that one, even though they gave up on it 15 years ago. But we don't have to decide that when we hear that presentation. We're just going to hear it. Everybody will be up to the same level of knowing things that, at least in the past, were rejected and why. And they might not be rejected on the criteria that we're eventually going to decide to reject things on. We'll bring it back on that basis.
A couple of questions. So part of what I heard too from Peter is that for him, the criteria in a sense are an emergent property of understanding the substantive material. Part of what I heard from you is that as you look at the alternatives, they may have been rejected under a different filter than you're going to apply. The city's going to submit alternatives just like everybody else, correct?
Yes. Yes. So, wait, I have something else to say. So I guess the other thing that I would say is that with respect to the criteria conversation, it seems to me that if you start really talking about the scenarios and the nature of the conversation you would have about the scenarios, at least as I think about what they're going to be, and maybe I have the advantage of you there, is that the conversation there will also surface criteria that are important to you. It's another way of getting to that set of information. The other suggestion I have that might meet some other interests that I heard expressed earlier is rather than ask John Ricker and Terry to give presentations on their views, perhaps we could ask them to sort of be commentators on the presentation that Stratus gives.
Right, because you won't have the IRP then.
Right, and that they could sort of, as we go through that process, because they have the history of the long-term history, could make comments that would, tell a little story or reflect something that happened that builds in that sense that I've heard people wanting to talk or hear from those people about their sort of big picture, long-term perspective.
So that would balance something else that you talked about way before when you're talking about consultants of wanting the fresh look as well as the old wisdom. All right, David.
Although to that end, you also might involve people from the department as commentators also, because there's a couple of them, like Toby and Heidi, who also, because of the work that they've done in the last 10 years, really have perspective.
Maybe we could put them like in a gallery with peanuts and they could. So that looks like something that would happen in July and August. And that's interesting too, because in your idea, Rick, of having people who want to submit and who are serious about submitting, and they were invited to the July and the August meeting, it could help them refine their thinking up to the convention. All right, any other comments? All right, so this is a great modification of the scheme. Thank you so much. So aside from that, when you look at the agenda and the flow of that, any thoughts?
Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of sequence, I agree with Peter that having the presentation that we've talked about from Rauscher with the commentary is going to help inform us so that we can more effectively discuss the criteria. So we need to resequence things. Because,
the sequence during the day, that'll change so much.
Okay.
It's more the chunks of time. The way my mind works, I just can't see how much time it takes unless I lay it in a series.
That's fine.
It'll change. Got your own, yeah.
We have an hour allocated to the initial review of the alt submissions in our next agenda meeting, our next meeting. I'm not sure we need an hour for that. It might be something where we just kind of get a report on progress from the subcommittee, rather than really dive into it. It might be a little premature for a full-blown discussion. I would suggest we sort of limit that to a report on progress. We got 10 submissions, they're in your packet, and maybe that's it.
You are going to have to decide if you want to ask for another deeper round of questions. So that might take a little bit more time. But I hear what you're saying. You don't want to delve into the details of the submissions until the end of the process.
I'd actually suggest that we don't do that step. And of course, the subcommittee can decide otherwise, but I think it's better to just say, yeah, come on, you know, and not get into a lot of discussion in advance. We're going to have the Alts Fair or the SAC, and that would be the time to get into the nitty-gritty of the proposals and not spend a lot of time before that.
Okay, so we shrink that a bit.
We should also assume that the people, that at least the vast majority of people making these presentations have some understanding of what would be reasonable criteria for consideration of their ideas, that, you know, it can't cost more than we have, it can't destroy the world, it can't, you know, and we don't have to tell them all those things because we're assuming they're adults and they understand,
Okay.
you know, what's going on, right?
So those are subcommittee ideas. Any more emphasis switches on at least the July agenda? If it's just about timing, I wouldn't worry about the August one because things are going to change a lot. I mean, the big change was that you want to be reviewing alternatives between now and then, and that works great for another thing that you asked, which is, can we play with the model a little bit? Well, you can't play with the model unless you have some alternatives to stick in there. So excellent. Synergy. Is this just fatigue, or like you're so excited about this great July and August thing that you can hardly contain yourselves?
One more suggestion.
Yes.
There were criterion in the integrated water plan that I'm sure we're going to agree with. So if we could just get, I mean, I'm volunteer to bring copies of that if people want to see that too.
Well, one of the things that you assigned, Nicholas, or that you're going to have some compilations of criteria to work off of instead of starting from scratch.
Okay, great.
Okay, anything else? Are we done an hour early? No, we have
Beautiful day.
oral communication and the evaluations, and oh my gosh, none of you is getting out of this room until you turn in your evaluations.
That's what you think.
Yeah, good luck with that.
All right, and do we have any oral communications that either one of you two stalwart survivors wish to make? You can talk for half an hour or so.
I enjoyed and appreciated listening.
Come and grab the mic.
Especially if it's positives.
I enjoyed listening, and I enjoyed and appreciated listening to all of you, raise ideas and explore considerations throughout the afternoon and yesterday too. So, thanks.
Thank you.
I appreciate also the sensitivity to community participation.
Yes, Mark.
Since we have an extra hour,
I don't like where this is going.
we didn't really talk about the presenters, which were a subject of some discussion earlier.
Well, no, we did.
And
Didn't we?
We said that
we were going to revisit it.
No,
put them in the role of commentators on the presentation done on the...
They're going to be, so the Rauscher will present about the alternatives, and John Ricker, and I don't know what his name is. Terry Tompkins, not an H, and possibly some staff will act like commentators to those presentations. So that's their role. That is the answer to that question. Is that correct?
But there are other presenters on our list that we didn't discuss when it might be appropriate to hear from them.
Ah, and I had understood from the previous discussion incorrectly that those presenters were more likely to appear in the real deal. So correct me. Who are the other presenters that you would like to see during Recon?
Well, frankly, I would like us to see Trevi Systems. That's why I suggested them, and to see them early, because we're considering all alternatives, and one of the big knocks on the desal alternative has been its energy consumption, and it's a huge problem. And they have a system that reduces the energy consumption. And in terms of learning about different alternatives, I think that's one of them.
So, if I've got it right, October is the main month for ratings. So, if it's okay with the rest of the committee, that would be the timing?
I'm not picky about the timing.
Okay.
And I'm not picky about whether it happens at the end of recon or at the beginning of the real deal as we consider alternatives.
Right, okay.
So yeah, that's the question I have is, can we invite them to submit in the Alts Fair kind of strategy? I mean,
Possibly, although I'd really like to know what Rauscher and staff think of their technology and whether it's a viable alternative that has benefits for us.
well, and that is a different question from necessarily having them come and present here. That might be a research question that we would want to say, you know, we're aware of this technology and that technology and something else that we really want and we could give that to, at some point, this meeting or next meeting, we could give, or any meeting really, we could give them certain tasks related to researching ideas that the committee agrees need to be looked into.
And that could be said, by the way, you know, that process of having our staff and consultant look at some of these presenters and determine when they might be best incorporated into our process, if at all, is a process that I'm comfortable with. Because, for example, Bill Teisling is a niche within the larger question of how we evaluate the economic impacts of shortages in our water supply. And Donna Myers will help relate to the fisheries thing, which we have staff that would do too.
Well, how about this? How about if this list, and this is, I almost feel like I'm channeling you right now, Mr. Baskin. How about if staff and consultants, see, I got them both, come with some, look at that Gantt chart and say, this person belongs here and here and here, and this is what we think, July, and so that goes on the July agenda. Everybody okay with that? July agenda is a forecast of where the various presenters might appear.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the list of presenters will be considered at during our July meeting as part of the agenda with Mr. Rauscher's input and staff's input in terms of where they fit into the presentation of concepts. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'm wondering if Rosemary could look to see, I must have sent 10 different individuals or groups to talk to Bill Coker in the past who had ideas about things. But whether there is such a list so that they at least are contacted, here's their chance again. Bill said, no, go away, I don't like your project or whatever, but now they have a chance to, whether it's going to be done as a presentation to us in a formal way or part of the Alts Fair, I'll leave it to you guys to figure out, but they should be told that they have another shot at this, another bite at this apple.
We have a few of them who come to these meetings. I mean, we had Jerry Paul and we've had Bill Fieberling, both of whom have been here, and you know, this is a good venue for them to present.
There was the guy that had something from the world of oil separation that thought could be applied to water. Nobody's ever done it before, but that guy should have a chance to explain. He has what he thinks is a very cheap way to desalinate water, but not using RO technology.
And I know that Doug has talked to somebody over at Stanford. So there, I mean, anybody who has an idea of somebody who needs to be reached out to relative to technology or the Alts Fair invitation, please feel free to send it to, you know, one of us, all of us, the committee members, and Sarah, me, Sid, to work on this, because it's really, to make this really work, we need to get it out there and make sure that people know that they have an opportunity.
So I'm a little fried at the end of this day, but which fairy tale is it where there's the fairy godmothers and you have to be sure you invite them all? Sleeping Beauty, indeed. All right, Charlie, tell me what you think about where we are now, and then we'll go clockwise around the room.
I think we're finally getting to the meat of the matter.
Microphone, please.
I'm encouraged. I think we're making progress and getting just past structure and into substance and ways to look at it.
I'm with Charlie, actually. I'm glad we're talking about the real stuff now. So it's
That's all right. This is the exciting part to be. So I concur.
I'm feeling very satisfied.
Surprised we are out of here a little early here.
And Nicholas, how did you let that happen? Thank you, Bob. See, you already have something to thank Bob Rauscher for.
There we go. I wouldn't have expected that 14 or 11 of us, the 14 today or whatever, would be such an effective group working together. There's usually somebody that throws bombs in the group or that disrupts stuff or wastes all of our time, and I'm very impressed with the way this group is working, and I think we're definitely on track here.
I agree with Mike.
I'm happy.
Yeah, I feel good about this process too. I think we're heading in the right direction.
I'm just really happy to be on the subcommittee.
You know you are.
I'm impressed with how well people are approaching collaboration and being open about things.
Oh my God! Well, no, you sit. You know, I went to a luncheon earlier this week, and I met 3 different strangers. And when I introduced myself and said why I was here, all 3 of them had responses like, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you," or "Oh, that'll never work." So when I started at Outreach Committee, I'm like, "Are you crazy? I've never worked with a committee like this before." And the staff, I'm just ecstatic, and they're like, "Oh, okay." I am.
So outreach committee.
That's absolutely true. I mean, when people say, "Oh, Nicholas, I hear you're working in Sacramento," no, sorry, so I say, and they're so tough down there. You know, they're really sort of wound up about this water thing and the desal and all that. And I say, well, yeah, but it's very difficult. But it's a good group, and it's really going well. So you're famous for the wrong things.
We're notorious.
You're notorious for the wrong things, but we'll change your, the word will get out that actually you're good at this.
Since I'm not going to see most of you until the next meeting, I just wanted to give you a heads up about a couple of things that are going on. You all are now going to receive the Water Commission mailing, which goes out next week. And I did want to let you know that in that packet, along with the presentation for the rate proposals, et cetera, that we promised last month, we are going to be providing the credit rating score, rating reports from Standard & Poor's and Fitch. And the Water Department was downgraded. Our credit was downgraded. There are typical AA, and we went to AA minus for in Standard & Poor's, and Fitch put us down 2 to A+. The reasons are basically lack of resolution of the water supply issue, drought, obviously the financial impacts of drought, and uncertainty relative to the rate increases that are needed to fund the capital and ongoing operations of the utility. So it's not the end of the world. We are in the process of refinancing some debt, and then we will be issuing some new debt to support our capital program in the fall after the rates are, fully through the process. But I did want you to have a chance to know that. The reports, when you see them in the Water Commission packet, I think actually give a pretty consistent for both of the agencies third-party view of what's going on here, and they're interesting and educational for that reason, if nothing else. And with that, happy Friday.
Really, happy Friday. You're all rooted to your seats. But you can go. Thank you.
Thank you.